April 13, 1945, late afternoon just outside Weimar, Germany. The smell hits first. It's not smoke, not exactly. It's sweet and rotten at the same time, clinging to the damp spring air. Mud sucks at polished leather shoes as a line of men and women, fur coats, tailored suits, silk scarves, hesitate at the edge of a barbed wire gate they never believed they would cross. An American officer raises his arm. "Move." The gate creaks open. You can almost feel the confusion ripple through the crowd: industrialists, bankers, doctors, the wives of party officials. People who attended concerts in Weimar theaters. People who dined well while the Reich collapsed around them. Now they are being marched forward by soldiers of the U.S. Third Army, rifles slung low, faces set in stone. Ahead of them stands a sign most claimed they'd never noticed before. Buchenwald. Inside, the ground is churned into a gray slurry. Prisoners in striped uniforms stand silent, skeletal, watching from behind barracks walls. Some don't look up at all. Others stare with hollow eyes, not with anger, not with triumph, but with something colder. Recognition. This is not a tour, this is not mercy, this is judgment. And the order to make it happen came from one man. General George S. Patton. Patton does not speak to the civilians when they enter. He stands off to the side, boots planted wide, ivory-handled pistols heavy on his hips. His jaw is clenched so tight it looks carved from stone. Witnesses later say he barely moved as the group was led past open pits, stacked corpses, wooden bunks still warm from bodies that had been dragged away hours earlier. Some of the civilians cover their mouths, others refuse to look. Patton notices every single one of them. He had issued the order plainly: the rich and prominent citizens of Weimar would walk through the camp. They would see it, smell it, stand in it. No speeches, no explanations, no chance to look away and claim ignorance later. Patton believed denial was already forming, and he despised it. But this moment, this cold, deliberate act of forcing Germany's elite to confront what had been done in their name, did not come from nowhere. It was not the impulsive cruelty of a man often caricatured as a blunt instrument. It was the product of a mindset forged months earlier, under very different conditions. Frozen roads, desperate odds, a moment when the world believed Patton's army was finished. December 1944, Lorraine, France. The wind cuts through steel helmets and wool coats alike. Snow crusts the hedgerows, engines idle low, fuel gauges trembling near empty. To German intelligence officers studying the front, the situation looks settled. Patton's Third Army is stuck. Logistically trapped, overextended, facing east, committed to an offensive that has stalled against stubborn German defenses. The Ardennes sector to the north, quiet, secondary, safe enough to strip of reserves. Then on December 16, the German counteroffensive explodes through the Ardennes. The Battle of the Bulge begins. And in German headquarters there is a quiet confidence. Patton cannot interfere, not in time, not with his supply lines strained and his corps oriented the wrong way. Even if he wanted to, the maps say it's impossible. Patton reads the same reports and dismisses them. Within hours he begins issuing orders that stun his own staff, not suggestions, orders. 3 corps, entire divisions, artillery, armor, engineers, logistics, everything will pivot north, not gradually, not when convenient. Immediately. It is a maneuver that has no margin for error. Roads glazed with ice, traffic jams stretching for miles, units passing each other in opposite directions in the dark, guided by shouted commands and hand signals. One breakdown, one blocked bridge, and the whole machine seizes. German planners do not see it coming. They cannot imagine it. Patton is asking his army to do something no modern force has ever attempted at that scale. A full-axis rotation under winter conditions in the middle of a fluid enemy offensive. And he does it without waiting for permission. By the time the 101st Airborne is surrounded at Bastogne, freezing and low on ammunition, Patton's columns are already grinding north. Tanks crawl through villages where civilians stare in disbelief. Engineers throw down steel matting to create roads where roads do not exist. Fuel trucks run day and night, headlights hooded, drivers sleeping in shifts of minutes. It is brutality but directed inward, discipline turned into momentum. Patton understands something others do not yet grasp: speed is morality in war, delay kills the innocent. hesitation compounds evil. When his relief forces break through to Bastogne, German officers captured in the aftermath leaf through maps again and again, searching for the mistake. There is none. The mistake was assuming Patton thought like them. That same understanding follows him into Germany months later. By April 1945, Patton has seen enough villages leveled, enough civilians displaced, enough evidence of systematic cruelty to recognize the pattern forming even before the war is fully over. The excuses are already rehearsed. We didn't know. It wasn't us. We were powerless. Patton has no patience for it. So when Buchenwald is liberated by American forces near Weimar, Patton does not treat it as a footnote or a press opportunity. He treats it as a battlefield revelation, something that must be confronted immediately, viscerally, and by those most insulated from its consequences. Hence the walk. As the civilians move deeper into the camp, a woman stumbles and nearly falls. An American soldier catches her arm, not gently, not cruelly, just enough to keep her moving. Ahead, a former prisoner locks eyes with a well-dressed man who once lived a few kilometers away. No words pass between them. They don't need to. Patton watches. And in his mind, the same question that drove him to pivot an entire army in December is forming again, only now it's sharper, heavier, and far more personal. If speed could save the living, what does justice require for the dead? Patton leaves Buchenwald the same way he entered it. Without ceremony. No speech to reporters, no address to the men. He climbs into his jeep, jaw tight, eyes fixed forward, and orders the convoy to move. To anyone watching, it might look like indifference. It is. Witnesses later recall Patton vomiting after his first full inspection of the camp. Others remember him packing alone, furious, not shaken in the way civilians were shaken but enraged by something deeper. The lie had already begun to spread. We didn't know. Patton had heard versions of it everywhere his army advanced. In towns reduced to rubble, in farmhouses flying white flags, in drawing rooms where silverware still gleamed while slave labor camps sat just beyond the tree line. He did not believe ignorance on this scale was possible. And unlike many commanders, Patton was not interested in soothing the defeated. He believed the war did not end when the shooting stopped. It ended when truth was forced into the open. In the days following Buchenwald's liberation, Third Army units are ordered to compile lists. Not Nazis in hiding, not SS officers. Civic leaders. Mayors, factory owners, physicians, judges, professors, the wives of Gauleiters, men who wore no uniforms but signed documents, women who attended fundraisers and concerts while prisoners starved within cycling distance of their homes. Patton's directive is clear: they will see what was done. Not through photographs. Not through testimony. Through their own senses. American officers escort them back into the camps. They walk past crematoria still warm to the touch, past storage rooms stacked with personal effects, shoes, glasses, wedding rings. Some civilians begin to protest, claiming they were never allowed inside, that the SS controlled everything. Patton rejects the argument outright. Control to him is not just command, it is benefit, and these people benefited. He instructs his officers to make the civilians help bury the dead. Not ceremonially, physically. Shovels in manicured hands, silk sleeves rolled up, mud soaking into expensive leather, some retch, some cry, a few faint. Patton does not stop the process. This is not cruelty for cruelty's sake, it is exposure. Because Patton understands something many politicians will not fully grasp for decades: evil does not require monsters, only comfort, distance, and silence. The same mindset had driven his actions months earlier, when silence would have meant disaster. During the Ardennes crisis, Allied command hesitated, reports conflicted, intelligence estimates shifted. Whether grounded air support, the safe choice was to wait. Patton despised waiting. He had spent his career studying war not as theory but as momentum. He believed decisive action was not recklessness, it was responsibility. When Eisenhower asked him how quickly he could attack north, Patton answered calmly, 3 days. What Eisenhower didn't know was that Patton had already issued preliminary movement orders. He was not gambling, he was committing. That distinction mattered. Now, in Germany, Patton sees the same hesitation forming, this time moral, not tactical. A desire to smooth over, to stabilize, to move on. He refuses. He writes in his diary that the German people must see, must know, must be made to understand. He worries that without confrontation, the narrative will be rewritten before the bodies are even buried. He is not wrong. Even as civilians walk through Buchenwald under armed guard, rumors circulate that the camps are exaggerations, that photographs are staged, that responsibility belongs only to a few fanatics. Patton knows better, so he makes denial uncomfortable. Not all Allied commanders approve. Some believe Patton is overstepping, that collective humiliation risks breeding resentment rather than reckoning, that Germany will be needed as a stable partner in Europe's future. Patton does not argue. He has no patience for hypotheticals when faced with mass graves. To him, stability built on denial is rot, and rot spreads. He instructs officers to document everything: names, reactions, statements. He orders photographs taken not just of the camps but of the civilians inside them. He wants a record that cannot be erased. Because he has already seen how quickly truth becomes inconvenient. One American lieutenant later recalls escorting a well-dressed man through a barracks at Buchenwald. The man insisted he lived nearby but never suspected anything. The lieutenant stopped him, pointed to the watchtowers visible through the broken windows, pointed to the smoke stains on the ceiling, pointed to the prisoners' tattoos, and asked quietly, "What did you think was happening here?" The man had no answer. Patton would have considered that the point. As weeks pass, Patton's Third Army continues pushing east. New camps are uncovered, new civilians marched through them. The process repeats again and again. But behind Patton's fury is something colder: calculation. He knows the war is ending. He knows narratives will be shaped by those who survive. He knows memory is fragile and denial is powerful. And he understands something else, something deeply unsettling. The same society capable of pretending Buchenwald did not exist is capable of doing it again. Unless it is forced to look. Late one evening, Patton reportedly tells a subordinate that the Germans are more dangerous in defeat than in victory, not because of weapons, but because of memory. If they forget, he says, they'll forgive themselves. And forgiveness without acknowledgement is not reconciliation. It is rehearsal. As Patton's jeep rolls out of another liberated town, another list of prominent citizens already being drawn up, one truth is becoming unavoidable. The general who once turned an entire army in the snow without waiting for orders is now doing the same thing to a nation's conscience. And this time there is no retreat route. The roads into central Germany are no longer frozen. They are choked. Columns of refugees move west with carts and bundles, eyes hollow, faces gray. Defeated Wehrmacht units trudge east under guard, weapons gone, uniforms dirty and stripped of insignia. Between them all, Patton's armor keeps rolling, Shermans rattling past church spires and shattered factories, engines growling like they have somewhere urgent to be. Because Patton believes they do. To him, the war is no longer just about defeating an enemy force. That part is almost over. Berlin will fall, the Reich will collapse. That outcome is inevitable now. What is not inevitable is what comes next. And Patton knows it. In headquarters, tents and commandeered villas, staff officers begin to notice something unusual. Patton is no longer asking only about bridges, fuel stocks, and enemy dispositions. He wants reports on towns, on factories, on local administrators. Who ran them? Who signed orders? Who lived well? He is hunting responsibility the way he once hunted maneuver gaps. Because the same principle applies: if you don't move fast, someone else will control the narrative. Patton's critics, even within the Allied command, are growing louder. They say he is obsessed, that he is letting personal anger dictate policy, that Germany must be rebuilt, not shamed into paralysis, that collective guilt will only harden resistance and sow future conflict. Patton hears none of it. Or rather, he hears it and dismisses it the same way he dismissed German estimates in December 1944. As dangerously wrong. To Patton, guilt is not collective, it is layered. and the top layer the educated, the wealthy. The influential had enjoyed every benefit of the system while claiming none of its crimes. That to him is the most unforgivable sin. One evening, after another camp inspection, Patton gathers several officers and speaks with unusual clarity. He does not shout. He does not curse. He simply says that if Germany is allowed to believe this horror was imposed upon it, rather than enabled by it, then the next war is already being prepared. Some officers shift uncomfortably. This is not how victors are supposed to talk. But Patton has never cared about how victors are supposed to behave. The forced marches of civilians through the camps continue. And something changes. At first, the reactions are predictable: shock, denial, disgust, tears. But over time, American officers begin to notice moments that unsettle them far more. Recognition. Not guilt, not grief. Recognition. A factory owner stops at a work detail and stares too long. A physician recognizes a former patient among the dead. A mayor goes silent when he realizes how close the camp had been to his own home. These moments do not bring absolution, but they break the lie. And Patton considers that a victory. He writes to his wife that the things he has seen are worse than anything in combat, worse than wounded men screaming in the snow, worse than burning tanks. Because combat has rules. This had bureaucracy, schedules, paperwork, quiet cooperation. And that terrifies him. Yet even as Patton pushes this moral offensive, another conflict is already forming, one that will soon consume headlines and reshape alliances. The Soviet Union. Patton watches Red Army units advance from the east, their methods brutal, their discipline rigid, their political officers everywhere. He does not trust them, he never has. And in his mind, the stakes of memory grow even higher. If Germany is allowed to see itself only as a victim crushed between Hitler and Stalin, then the camps will become footnotes, bargaining chips, excuses. Patton will not allow that. So he pushes harder. Orders more inspections. More documentation. More exposure. Because he understands something few commanders ever do: history does not remember what you intend, only what you force into the record. By late April, some American officers quietly begin to limit the scope of his directives. Higher command grows uneasy, political considerations creep in, reconstruction plans are drafted, the language softens. Patton senses the shift immediately. He has always been able to feel momentum changing. And it engages him. One night, he tells an aide that wars are easy compared to peace. In war, he says, the enemy wears a uniform. In peace, he wears excuses. It is a line that will never make it into an official communiqué. But it captures exactly why Patton is doing what he's doing. The last civilians marched through the camps under Third Army supervision do not cry as much as the first. They walk slower, quieter, they look longer. And Patton watches them go, knowing full well that even this may not be enough. Because he has seen how quickly people forget the impossible once it becomes inconvenient. And as Germany collapses behind him and the next global confrontation looms ahead, one question hangs in the air, unspoken, unresolved, and deeply uncomfortable. What happens when the man forcing the world to look is finally told to stop? The shift is subtle at first. No dramatic confrontation. No shouted commands, just new phrases creeping into messages from above: stabilization, reconciliation, future cooperation. The language of war is quietly being replaced by the language of politics. Pat notices immediately. He always does. By early May 1945, Germany is finished. Hitler is dead, the Reich has surrendered, flags are changing, borders are being drawn, and the men who once demanded speed now ask for restraint. Patton is told politely that some of his directives are no longer necessary. He understands what that means. In one staff meeting, an officer carefully suggests that continued civilian exposure to the camps might provoke resentment, that rebuilding trust will be difficult if humiliation continues. Patton stares at him for a long moment. Then he replies evenly that trust built on lies is not trust at all. No one argues. But the orders stand. The walks through the camp slow, then stop. Responsibility shifts from generals to committees, from commanders to administrators, the language becomes abstract, atrocity becomes excess, complicity becomes complexity. Patton despises abstraction. He believes clarity is moral. And he believes clarity is being sacrificed. Privately, Patton grows more outspoken. He writes furious diary entries. He complains that former Nazis are being quietly reinstated to keep factories running, that anti-communism is already becoming more important than accountability. In one entry, he writes that Germany is being whitewashed before the blood has even dried. These thoughts will later cost him. His reputation, already controversial, begins to shift. The general who saved Bastogne. The commander who moved faster than anyone thought possible. The man who forced civilians to confront Buchenwald. Now he is increasingly seen as a problem. Too blunt. Too inflexible. Too dangerous for the politics of peace. Patton senses the walls closing in. He continues visiting camps even when not required. He speaks to survivors through interpreters, listens without interruption. He does not promise justice. He does not offer comfort. He offers acknowledgement. And to many survivors, that matters more than speeches. In June 1945, Patton is relieved of Third Army command. Officially it is routine. Unofficially everyone knows why. His views are inconvenient, his language is unfiltered. His refusal to play the diplomatic game makes him a liability in a world now focused on alliances and containment. The man who thrived on movement is being sidelined. As Patton packs his belongings, one aide asks him if he regrets forcing the German civilians to walk through the camps, if perhaps it went too far. Patton answers without hesitation. No. He says if anything, it did not go far enough. Because seeing is the beginning, not the end. He leaves Germany convinced of two things. First, that evil flourishes fastest where people are allowed to look away. Second, that history is already softening the edges of what happened. He will not live long enough to see how right he is. Years later, many of the civilians who walked through Buchenwald will claim the memory faded. That time passed, that they moved on. But the photographs remain. So do the reports. So does the fact that, for one brief moment, denial was not an option. Because one general refused to accept it. Patton dies in December 1945, the war behind him, the future uncertain. But the question he forced into the open, about responsibility, about speed, about the cost of silence, never fully disappears. It lingers. Uncomfortable. Unresolved. And as long as the camps still stand, as long as the earth remembers what was buried beneath it, the walk he ordered through Buchenwald continues, long after the soldiers went home. End.